Interest rates are a great way to understand whether the economy is doing well. High interest rates mean the economy is doing great. Lower rates means the economy is struggling along. Welcome to the Urban Property Investor. I'm your host, Sam Saggers, here to help you crack the code of real estate wealth. Today's show, code-cracking stuff. Yes, we're going to dig into employment, economics. We're going to take a look at really the cash rate world and see if we can get it a little bit lower. I think property investors love low rates. We love when the economy is struggling along because really here in Australia, the real estate market is kind of counterintuitive to the rest of the economy. When the economy is flat and falling, well, real estate becomes cheaper to own, and of course that pushes values up. But interesting enough, I think it's time to do a few predictions about what next when it comes to 2026. Where will the real estate market be? Where will the cash rate actually find itself? Where will forecasters position marketplaces? I think it's a good and worthy conversation. So welcome back, regulars. You know the drill. Play the program in double speed, get your life back. And of course, all the episodes I've done are lessons on real estate. The Australian Property Game is the name of my book. So I don't know if I just repeated all that. I could have possibly repeated it all. I don't know. We never know if the show's going to be good till we get to the end, so let's see how we go. But let's talk economics for a moment. The economy is humming along, well, kind of spluttering along is probably a better way to describe it. We've got a little bit of GDP growth. We, of course, are trying to slow down inflation. The unemployment rate is stable, but slightly drifting a little bit higher. And of course, from a policy outlook perspective, really one could argue that lower rates are needed to kickstart the economy. And of course, interest rates are a great way to understand whether the economy is doing well. High interest rates mean the economy is doing great. Lower rates means the economy is struggling along. And of course, the prediction in this interest rate cycle is that the rates will drop. In fact, the current cash rate, which at the time of recording is 3.6%. It is predicted to drop by December to 3.35% by CBA as well as Westpac. And the Australian National Bank has further rate cuts happening into February 2026 with a forecast decline in the cash rate to 3.1%. So maybe the cash rate may drop 2 more times, even 3 more times over the next 12 months. And of course, that would be music to the ears of anyone who has a home loan. Of course, around 30% of Australians actually carry debt. 30% of people kind of rent, and the other 30% is owning properties outright. And then there's about sort of 10% that kind of come and go from the country. So around a third of Australians are banking on the cash rate continuing to drop. Now, remember, the high for the cash rate was 4.35%, which was back in 2023. We have already come down close to 1%, and many economists predict that it will get even lower. So there are some cases for further rate cuts, and really the only reason rates would not be cut is if the economy actually rebounds a little bit quicker. For example, GDP growth really is predicted to be around 2%. If the country was starting to grow at, say, 2.5%, then you probably couldn't cut rates. If unemployment doesn't actually go up, it stays stable, it's going to be hard for the Reserve Bank governor to actually continue to cut rates. But the case for a rate reduction, if you like, a further rate reduction, is fairly compelling. Really, what is the narrative around that is today 4 out of 5 jobs being created in the economy are being created through the government, through basically government jobs or government funding. Government funding is infrastructure projects, it's the NDIS, it's things the government comes up with for people to do. And of course, if most employment growth is being driven by the public sector, not the private sector, it's a false narrative on productivity. So governments know this, and we've got kind of like a fairly stable level of governance. We've got really the idea of a second term with the current Prime Minister, who's effectively able to start to slow down government spending. And of course, really, if you've got an economy which is increasingly reliant upon government spending, such as the NDIS, to sustain job creation, can become a bit of a problem. And of course, it becomes a burden on taxpayers. And it means that at some point you have to actually just slow down how much the government is deploying into the public sector. And it's fair to say that many believe that there will be a government slowdown on spending in the public sector. So that means the private sector has to create the jobs from the public sector. The public sector has been doing the lion's share of the work, so that means corporate Australia needs to provide most of the jobs moving forward. And the private sector job creation has been weak. There are just fewer job roles compared to the public sector at the moment. A lot of that has to do with Australia's tax base and how companies are treated in Australia, how they're overtaxed, how they can't spend enough on R&D, how they have things like payroll tax that you've got to you get taxed for giving people employment in this country as an employee or as an employer. So there's a lot of inefficiencies in corporate Australia, which is killing the tax situation. Now, I've just lost my light. Let me go under my desk, see if I can get it back. That's it. It's official. I have no light. I knew that would happen. Should the show go on? Should I abandon ship? I think we've got to keep tackling it, folks. We've got to keep going. The show can't end. You can see my light. It's now dead. I have a dead light. My productivity is going to drop. But corporate Australia's productivity has dropped, just like my light. And of course, if the government start to pull back on effectively their fiscal tightening around what they're going to spend on the NDIS, then the jobs market's going to soften. It's going to soften. And that creates a case for the cash rate to drop. If the private sector isn't going to fill those roles, we're going to see a little bit of unemployment or the participation rate basically move. And for basically people with a mortgage, this is good news. For people who perhaps are being made redundant, that's not such a great thing. But I will caveat that we're talking about an unemployment rate which is at record lows and a participation rate which is at record high. So if we go from sort of 4.1% unemployment to 4.3%, it's jobs, but what it shows is the economy is weakening. And of course, basically the government's got to make sure they continue to repair the budget and don't overspend, and really monitor where they are spending money. And of course, a lot of this is also connected to the cost of living, which is challenging for people because of bracket creep, which is basically that every time we get a pay rise, we're just basically passing it all on in tax because of the way the tax system basically slides. The more you make, the more tax you pay. And so people are just not taking home enough money. And of course, we have seen subsidies to offset that, like electricity rebates. Yes, here in Australia, we've had a year of electricity rebates, which have all now ended. So that extra $1,000 that you didn't realize you weren't paying is no longer basically going to cover your electricity world. And so that energy rebate, which was set in to help people with the cost of living relief, has disappeared. And so when you think about it, 4 out of 5 jobs being created through the government spending. If government stops spending and corporate Australia can't fill the roles, you'll get a little bit higher unemployment. The fiscal implication of that will be that the Reserve Bank of Australia, knowing that even though there is a little bit of wage growth, it effectively is being absorbed by the Australian government in tax, and that there are no longer energy rebates, means that households are going to be under pressure, which means there's going to be less spending, which ultimately means they're probably not going to go out and spend their hard-earned money in a services economy, which means the only answer is a rate cut, and the cycle is ready to deliver on that story. So some would argue we should have had cuts further already, but it's not to be. It hasn't happened, but it's fair to say maybe there's another 2 or 3 in the system. And of course, that's going to have a direct correlational effect on the property market cycle. And days on market at the moment are pretty low. For example, Sydney 39, Melbourne 37, Brisbane 23. And then when we look at the growth predictions into next year, dwelling price forecast, you got Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide all doing around 6% capital growth rates. Westpac has predicted that Melbourne does 8% capital growth rate, with Hobart 4%. So what does that do to the median house price of Sydney? Well, it goes from 1.5 to 1.67. It's $150,000 price movement upwards. Melbourne goes up about 100,000. Brisbane close to 100, Perth 100, Adelaide 70, and Hobart 30. So everything's going to get more expensive. Why? Because the economy is actually due for further rate cuts. Again, when you have a stable situation, but it's a non-productive economy, you're going to have to lower rates. And so certainly over the short and medium term, we are in a stable and growing environment, but a stagnated productivity environment. Certainly Australia will be one of those places in the world which is a safe haven for investment. We've got some big things here afoot in real estate, like the wealth transformation, millennials buying properties. However, we will have softening interest rates, which will bolster the real estate market. It's going to happen. Remember, we've got some structural shifts with unlocking certain supply in Australia, but also demand from downsizers and right sizes. The biggest challenge in Australia is productivity. We don't have enough trades to build the homes we need, and that is going to put pressure on everything. It's going to put pressure on house prices and the rental marketplace. So I think, there is a case for some rate drops down the track. And of course, that means you need to be on your toes. Well, I'm going to call it there. This could be the shortest podcast I've ever done, but I think it was pretty informative. But because my light's broken, I'm going to stop because I need to now work out how to fix my backdrop of my studio. But hey, folks, make sure you get the book, Amazon, The Australian Property Game. All right, that's it for me. Over and out. Thanks for tuning in to The Urban Property Investor. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube so you never miss an episode. I'd love for you to rate the show and share it with your family and friends. Let's spread the word about property investing. Stay connected between episodes on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And check out the rest of our podcast network at positivementor.com.au. And if you're serious about growing your property portfolio, don't miss our complimentary Property Investor Nights. Register now via the link in the show notes. See you next time.